Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical strategies of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, executive and life coach Meredith Oak, with a quick announcement. If you're a practitioner, that means you work with clients or patients in any capacity in the health and wellness space. Please take note, the Applied Quantum Biology certification closes November 30th. The doors are closing and they will not be open again until spring 2024 at the earliest. If you're at all drawn to this material, you do not want to miss this opportunity. We go deep into the science with clinically experienced teachers, as well as a community of people who are all doing the same thing. It is incredible. Go to appliedquantumbiology.com to register. The link is in the show notes. Don't miss it. Once we understand the importance of circadian rhythms and how having a regulated circadian rhythm is so important to every aspect of health, from our sleep to our digestion to our moods, our hormones, our neurotransmitters, all of it, the next question people often ask is, well, what about the kids, particularly the teenagers who are doing their homework and socializing and spending so much time on screens, particularly in the evening hours? Well, our next guest not only wondered about this, he set up a foundation called the Sleep Better, Live Better Foundation, and he set up a study with his local Department of Education to find out what would happen if you gave blue blocking glasses to students to use 3 hours before bedtime instead of just the pure screens in their eyes. And they tracked everything that they could. This is a huge undertaking to do with families and schools and coordinating all of it and getting all of the data in. But they were able to find some statistically relevant results. And Daniel is here today to share those with us. And this is really exciting and really important because nobody is doing this kind of research, right? There are no institutions. Daniel had some figures from some very well-known brand name schools in the background supporting him and guiding him, but there was nobody from quote unquote official place that wanted to put their name on this. But Daniel found a way to do it, and we would love to support research like this in the future. So please listen to this podcast and check out all his links in the show notes at the end, and do whatever you can to support this important work. And if you have a teenager, you're going to get them a pair of blue blockers. Enjoy. Hi, Daniel White. Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hello, Meredith. Great to be here. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Daniel is a health coach, quantum health coach, and also the founder of the Sleep Better, Live Better Foundation, which he set up to help school-age children get better sleep. Because if you listen to this podcast, you know how important that is. So, Daniel, but I understand that you didn't sort of you came to the health coaching field a little bit later. How did you get here? And how did you get to this quantum biology blue light blocking world as well? Because it's a small little section of the world.
It is a small little section, and let me try and make this story as concise as possible. I think I get better at telling it every time. So I was not the poster child for good sleep. I've just turned 30 years old, and from the age of about 13 to the age of about 17, I was the only child that I knew that was as deeply addicted to screens and video gaming as anyone else. So we're going back to before the first iPhone. I was playing my computer all night, playing my Game Boys, all of these sorts of things, watching television late into the night. And, throughout my teenage years, I suffered a malady of issues, anxiety, depression. I was extremely overweight. I slept terribly. Obviously, the knock-on impacts of that to my school performance, my academic performance, my relationships with family, friends, loved ones, everything. And I suppose when I hit about 17 or 18, went to the UK equivalent of high school, started to want to make changes to improve my health, and went down a very conventional route of, count every calorie in the fridge and move more and eat less. And that got me into some challenges with my mental health around addictions to kind of health behaviors and things like that. Spending a lot of time still in gyms, artificial lighting everywhere, indoors all of the time, barely spending any time outdoors, working away, doing a degree in psychology at the time. I actually stumbled across one of the books that first started to kind of change me. I wasn't aware of quantum health and quantum biology, or even the science of light exposure at all. But I read something called the Primal Blueprint, which was by a guy called Mark Sisson, and he was talking about like an evolutionary and ancestral approach to diet and movement, and spending more time outdoors, exercising outdoors, eating more variety in our diets, kind of the early paleo kind of primal movement. And I guess I fell into that camp, went back to university, studied a master's in nutritional neuroscience. So began to learn more about the wondrous impacts of nutrition on our physiology and our biology and things like that. Subsequently, after that, went into functional medicine, which felt like an even newer closets in Narnia that I'd opened. And stress and looking at breathing and looking at community and looking at my spiritual health and my meaning and my purpose, and so many new avenues to healing continued to open up for me as I went down that path. And then around about 5 or 6 years ago, I suffered a period of burnout as a result of a personal relationship breaking down and a professional relationship breaking down. And I found myself really struggling to keep what was a coaching business alive at that time. And I was up all night, working hard on my laptop, up in the morning early, burning the candle at both ends. And I just completely burnt out. And I actually came across a post by Nathan Walls. And he was talking about like the impacts of exposure to morning light and our circadian rhythms and blue light blocking glasses. And I think he'd quoted Jack Kruse. And I was thinking I was hoping for a miracle at that point. And I saw these blue light blocking glasses and I was there like, this makes a lot of sense. So ordered my first pair from RA Optics. I think it was one of the only people that I could find them from back then. Got them shipped to the UK from the US, and they were expensive, right? These things weren't accessible to everybody that I knew at home. And as anybody in this community might expect, I wore them for one night and, I was never the same again. I still used technology a bit too much, and, my routines still weren't ideal in the evenings, but I had this safety mechanism. I had this low hanging fruit that I could now use. And I instantly, noticed the impact it had on my mood, my energy, my appetite, my clarity of thought, my cognition, and all of these things. And so I really went very deep down the rabbit hole of circadian health at the time. I wasn't as astute in quantum biology at that point. But my brain, it zooms out, sees everything 30,000 feet up. And I started to think about, the big implications of things like light exposure and the use of blue light blocking glasses in society and in communities. And just for a bit of context, I live in Guernsey in the Channel Islands, which is just in between England and France, part of the United Kingdom, but we're not part of England. And, we have a very small, tight-knit community here, maybe 50, 60,000 people. And I started to ask questions about, what if I could get these tools, blue light blocking glasses, or, the light filtering software, Iris, and all these different things that we use as quantum clinicians. What if I could get these into the hands of everyday people? And so time went by for a couple of years. I started delivering a lot of sleep training through Sleep Better, Live Better in the community and with organizations online all over the globe. And then one day I was going through a coaching program, and the certification I was doing, they said to me, you really need to understand your origin story, because to attract, clients and to resonate with people, you need to be able to speak to the reasons that, you've been on this journey yourself. And many times, a coach or anybody working in the field of health will tend to find that they end up trying to quote unquote save the person that they once were. And so I stepped back thinking that I was, this coach who was working with adults, trying to help them sleep better and stuff like that. And I didn't get the memo at that point. And it wasn't until I had this crazy dream, quite literally a dream, that I was stood up on a television program. I know it was a dream because the program doesn't exist anymore. In the United Kingdom, it was like a breakfast show. And I was addressing the nation, and we were talking all about how we'd provided these blue light blocking glasses and simple educational interventions to children in schools in the Channel Islands, which is not just Guernsey, it's also another island called Jersey, and that we'd seen phenomenal explosions in increases in mental health, in academic attainment, just across the board. Everything had changed for these kids as a result of this simple stuff. And obviously I wake up in the morning and I think, well, these glasses did this for me. These principles did that for me. I'm going to have to do this thing. And so that began about 3 years ago now, 3.5 years ago, a journey which culminated in the registration of our charity, which is the Sleep Better, Live Better Foundation, so that I could fundraise to provide zero cost to consumer education and products and resources. And then also began a number of trials in local schools, which began with a self-funded trial where we provided blue light blocking glasses to children in high school around age 15 or 16, a small sample of around 100. We got some phenomenal results. And then I wanted to do something bigger and more rigorous. So designed what's called an open level wait list study, where we recruited somewhere between 300 and 500 students from the island. We split them into different groups, and in the different groups, we provided them with different tools or interventions. We were supported by this. I want to give a very, very big shout out to Rudy and Joy over at Viva Rays, who your listeners may know. I think they're part of this community. They provided us with the lens technology to conduct this study, which is a phenomenal source of support. And we split them into 4 groups. The kids, the first was they would receive blue light blocking glasses and were instructed to wear them for a few hours before bedtime. The second group would receive the glasses with 2 simple education lessons, just teaching very simple circadian health and sleep principles, talking about our circadian rhythms, talking about light exposure in the morning and the evening, talking about food and nutrition timing, talking about the timing of caffeine, a little bit on breath awareness and helping people, children in particular, to downregulate and things like that. So we had that combined group that got the education with the glasses. We then got the third group, which was education only, and then the fourth group, which were on the waiting list. So we just recently, in January of this year, completed that study, and I actually just got the statistical analysis finished this morning before we jumped on this call. So it'd be interesting to talk about, I think. Oh, I think you might be on mute still.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So you started out as a child who was addicted to screens, playing video games. What would you say? How many hours per day would you say you were on video games when you were, say, 15 years old?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I credit the screens with the terrible sleep issues I had because of the bright LED lights and the amount of blue light that I was exposed to. But obviously there was other elements going on, like there was an addiction, there was a need to escape from whatever I was facing as a teenager that led me into it in the first place. I reckon, to begin with, in secondary school, it was maybe 1 or 2 or 3 hours a day. And then it literally turned into 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day. I dropped out of school when I was 15 years old. I just decided I didn't want to go to the kind of quite astute school that I was at. So I went down to a state school, spent as much time kind of escaping from school as I possibly could to be in front of screens and things like that. And I think one of the most interesting things for me in exploring that, the irony as I come full circle now and I'm 30 years old, and me and my friends sometimes occasionally play some of the old games that we used to play as teenagers, is that the addiction isn't there because of my awareness and understanding of how to interact with technology, and especially like light exposure from screens, so that my brain, my dopamine circuitry, my cortisol levels, they're not fried and through the roof, and I'm not continually, remaining addicted to the use of the technology. But back when I was 15, to answer your question, it was a lot of time.
Right. So I think that's really important because you have a lived experience of what it's like to be a teenager and, be getting terrible sleep and be basically blue light toxic, I think is the word we would use now, on top of whatever else is going on, that the mental stimulation and escapism of that video games produce. And I also just want to say, because sometimes people listen to these podcasts and they think like, oh, whoever's hosting the podcast does everything perfectly. There is an Xbox in our home, and my son likes to play Fortnite with his friends. And when the sun goes down, the blue blockers go on. So there are limits, but I just want to say that to parents listening, like, it's possible to do these things in a reasonable way. Okay, so you are now in a situation where you have created a foundation that's able to help the children who are stuck in that situation. And I think what's interesting about the time we live in now is that you don't even need to be a video game addict to be blue light toxic, right? Like with the iPads and the phones, and we're on laptops all day at school, and our light bulbs have gotten so much worse, as Daniel Levitt was explaining to me, right? Like, I think that so many of our children are suffering, and they might not even have terrible video game habits. It's just the water that they're swimming in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was one of the most shocking and clearest things to me when I went into schools to provide the training and the education. I was sat in a school hall. I have about 300 kids in front of me. Not all of them were participating in the study, but they were all receiving the education. And I had about 20% of them down one side of the hall that are asleep. And this is at like 11 o'clock in the morning. They're literally asleep while I'm talking. Have you got 20% that look like they're kind of nodding off and they're just checking their mobile phones every few minutes? And then you got about the other 20% that are fully engaged. And when I started to interview and speak to these teenagers and speak to parents and stuff like that, it's screen use is pervasive now in every single age group. But the thing is, we have some level of responsibility to show up to work or to, do things as adults that stops us from staying awake all night on these screens. Back then for me, it was an affiliation with video gaming, but now it's obviously, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, social media apps of every kind you can imagine, as well as video games, as well as Xboxes, as well as computers, tablets, Netflix, and all of these things. And I don't think teenagers, quite clearly, neuroscience will tell us this, they don't have the self-regulation that we do as adults. And I think, other research is really clear that the iris is still developing in your youth, as a child, and your predisposition to be damaged by blue light and to have your circadian rhythms dysregulated at a time in your life cycle where there tends to be this phase shift towards a later sleep cycle from childhood into adolescence. The circadian clock is said to shift. I think a large impact on that is use of screens and technology and things like that, and it's a byproduct of our modern society that kids are staying up far later than their parents are. Some of the children I was speaking to, their average sleep time was 2-3 a.m. every single night, and they're sleeping with a mobile phone underneath their bed, their pillow. They're all chatting in Snapchat and WhatsApp groups, and the whole idea of FOMO, and you don't want to miss out. And I was deeply addicted to video gaming, and I probably still now there are probably few children who play video games as much as I did at that age. But now there is this wave of the majority of the youth consuming technology and using brightly lit artificial screens. And I think one of the most heartfelt things I heard when I was giving the training sessions is I went back in the second week, and in the education only group, we had showed them how to use a filter. I don't have my mobile phone with me now, but you guys might be aware of the ability to filter the blue light coming from mobile phone screens, and you can get various different apps and settings that can completely remove the blue light. And in the education only group, a couple of kids came up to me and said, we've just removed the blue light from our phone screens at night, and I don't want to go on my phone anymore. I want to fall asleep. And it's how much is blue light toxicity impacting neurochemistry in a young brain? In adults, it's quite clear that it's suppressing melatonin, chief functions within cells and mitochondria are breaking down. It's leading to chronic disease. It's leading to, fatigue. It's leading to mood regulation issues, focus, attention, cognition. But in children, it's stimulating them so much, more, it appears, than even in adults. And it's really shocking and scary to see. And at the same time, it was so enchanting to hear children, and I still get messages now. I had a few on Instagram the other day from young guys saying that they took part in the study and they want to know more, and have I got more resource, and they still wear their glasses every night and all these sorts of things. And I love to hear it, because unlike adults, anybody here who's been an adult or been coached or is a coach will know that we become fairly entrenched in our patterns of behavior. And a lot of adults that I work with in the sleep space, they say, I've always done it this way, or, this is me, you can't change me. I've always slept for 6 hours for the last decade. And, we develop all these really strong narratives about who we are and what we're capable of. If you tell a child, you wear this pair of blue light blocking glasses, you'll sleep better, you'll wake up tomorrow, you'll feel better, and they do it, they continue doing it. And I've had lots of circumstances where, I've had teenagers telling me that they're, encouraging their parents to now wear their blue light blocking glasses because they're saying, Mum and Dad, why wouldn't you do this? It's, it's obvious.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you wear these things? And I think that's really encouraging because at the end of the day, children in their youth, they just want to experience a high quality of life. They want to be happy. They want to be curious because they haven't had that beaten out of them by decades of, technology use.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really shocking to me the culture that has evolved around these devices. And when my son got his phone, like he has to leave it downstairs after a certain time, and like I come down in the morning and I look at it, and it's filled with Snapchat messages that I gave in at all hours of the night, right? And it's like, as parents, I think we really need to be mindful that that is not something that should be unregulated in a child's bedroom all night. Like it just, as much as I don't like to scare people or fearmonger or anything like that, you got to get the phone out of their beds, out of their bedrooms. Like just get it out, whatever it takes. Bribe them. I don't. Because you're going to explain to us some of the damage that it's doing. Okay, so you created this foundation, and you created a partnership with the schools in Guernsey, and did the study, dividing up the children. Some had the blue blockers, some had education, some had both. And so let's talk about what you found with the children who started wearing blue blocking glasses in the evenings. And I just want to also quickly say, I don't know why, but there's quite a lot of noise out there about blue blocking glasses being a gimmick and not working, which I find interesting because it's very easy to test if they work, right? It's a physical barrier. If it blocks a certain frequency of light, then it's blocking the light. But I just want to say that for people who've seen things floating around, there's a bunch of research floating around that was done on very poor quality blue blockers that actually doesn't block the light that's necessary. And that research was then used to say that blue blocking glasses don't work. So anecdotally, everybody I know who's tried them has seen a benefit almost immediately. So what you're doing is really important because you have high quality blue blockers from Viva Rays that do what they're supposed to do. And what did you find when the kids started using them?
Yeah. So before I tell you about the findings, I think it's interesting to bring up a couple of the points you said there, because I've had this conversation with a lot of optometrists locally. Actually, one of the biggest optometrists in the United Kingdom called Specsavers, one of the biggest organizations. They're based in Guernsey locally. And when I went out to the press to release the information about running our study, they prepared a counter statement, you could call it. They prepared a comment that they were going to leave in the local newspaper saying that, blue light blocking glasses, the Royal College of Ophthalmology has demonstrated that there's no evidence behind them, which is the blanket statement of people in the United Kingdom will know. Boots is a big high street retailer, an optometrist, Specsavers, all of these sorts of people. And they're going off the Royal College of Ophthalmology's systematic review of the available evidence. But, I had to very quickly remind them that we're talking about completely different glasses. Because, what you're discussing is what we might refer to as screen glasses or blue light blocking glasses for the daytime. And again, depending on the lens and the technology that's used in the lens, it can block, anywhere from 0 to 100%, and it can block different nanometer wavelengths of blue light. And so you really need to know what you're talking about. And, you need to be going with like reputable and credible brands, which is, one of the reasons that we worked with Viva Rays. Their technology is pretty incredible. Some of the best glasses that I've seen. And they immediately withdrew their statement, funnily enough, from the media that they were about to put in, because obviously they weren't talking about the same pair of glasses. And we're having interesting, conversations with them now moving forward. But one of the things I think that really rattles me a little bit is that in science, we're always looking for the double, blinded, placebo-controlled, randomized controlled trial. And sometimes that's just not possible or practical.
Yeah.
And these trials cost, sometimes hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pounds to conduct. And our study, for example, we had a control group in the form of the waitlist group. So it's an open level waitlist study where we try and create a control group whereby, someone doesn't receive the intervention versus other groups that do, as opposed to giving a fake pair of glasses. Because initially, when I went to the ethics committee in Guernsey and discussed wanting to do this trial, the advice of one of my mentors who's in the background, I can't mention his name at the minute, but he said to me, in ideal world, you'd want to give a pair of sham glasses, you'd want to give a pair of blue light blocking glasses that don't do anything. But of course, it's very difficult to give someone a pair of glasses with grey lens and them not understand that they've got the, placebo here. So it's a bit of a nightmare. But there are studies out there, I believe, of high enough, control and replicability that demonstrate that blue light blocking glasses have had benefits in groups of undergraduate students, in patients with bipolar and mania, in general population of workers and such like that. And so we just wanted to add to the evidence base, because when you start to take together all of these different types of studies and start to look at the global impacts of it, and there was a systematic review that was published. I don't know if I can tell you right now. Maybe we should put it in the show notes, actually, because it's a really powerful review, but it was published. Here you go. It's the evening wear of blue light blocking glasses for sleep and mood disorders, a systematic review. It was published in 2021. And they said, the summary of the abstract was, given the well-established biological mechanisms and clinical research showing that blue light blocking glasses are effective for inducing sleep, because we know of their ability to protect the release of melatonin from the pineal gland, they are a viable intervention to recommend to patients, with insomnia and other related sleep issues. So we know that there's evidence out there, just because it's not the highest quality evidence. The certain bodies, such as the Royal College of Ophthalmology, will completely ignore it. So that is a bit of a challenge. And then to speak to what we found. So number one, what did we measure? So we completed something called a sleep disturbance questionnaire. So it's a very simple questionnaire. Again, in an ideal world, we would have loved to connect people up with actigraphy, which is like activity monitors. We'd have loved to have given them Aura rings, or, connected them up to electroencephalograms in laboratories and all of these other things. But the reality is, in field work and in field studies, you can't afford those sorts of things, especially when you're a fledgling charity. So, with the support of V-Rays and some of our local corporate sponsors, we managed to get blue light blocking glasses, and we went out and we said, okay, we'll do some questionnaires and we'll do them before and afterwards. So we'll do them at intervals of 2 weeks. So we'll do them at week 0, weeks 2, and weeks 4. So over a 4-week period, we'll have 3 time measurements: what happened before the intervention, what happened midway through, and what happened at the end. And inside these questionnaires, the subcategorization of the questions related to sleep quality, sleep consistency, levels of stress and anxiety before bedtime, and levels of alertness the next day. So within each of those subcategories, there was other questions, but they all basically fed into those subcategories for us to get an understanding of those 4 kind of areas. And what was really interesting, I think, to begin with, is that the data showed that actually sleep scores were quite low. So if 1 was very poor, 2 was poor, 3 was fair, 4 was good, and 5 was very good on the 0 to 5 scaling for each of these questions, the averages were coming in at just under a 3 or just over a 3. So the majority of people were saying they were, sleeping fairly. And I think that's really interesting because, what we obviously picked up, although I can't 100% confirm this, is a subsection of people who are motivated to participate in the study. Now that suggests that, number one, it might be people who had sleep issues. But number 2, we might also be missing all the people that had sleep issues because they're not interested in complying with the study, or they're not motivated to do so, or they didn't turn up to school on the days when I provided the education, so all of their data was excluded and such like that. So we can't be sure about that, but we saw that stats were quite low. They were a little bit lower also for girls than they were for boys, interestingly enough.
And how old are these children?
So these children ranged from, so we did years 10, which would have been, 14 all the way up to 18. But the majority of them would have been 14, 15, and 16 years old.
Okay. So we're looking at teenagers, and the research that you got back showed that their baseline coming into the study was that they weren't sleeping very well.
Yeah. So then what we did was we repeated those questionnaires after 2 weeks and then again after 4 weeks. Now, what we found out through field research is that logistically, it's a nightmare to try and get 5-6 different schools to collaborate and all send questionnaires out correctly at the right times and not forget to send certain questionnaires out. And one school had an outbreak of COVID during the 4th questionnaire, so we didn't get any data back from them and things like that. But we have a really, really strong data set from day 0 to 14. And then we have some interesting data for our second follow-up. So from day 0 to 14, this is pretty much what we saw. We saw in some of the subcategories, we actually saw a decrease in sleep quality in the control group, so in the waitlist group. So everything averagely stayed about the same, but some of the subcategories actually decreased for the control group. So no change to their sleep, as you might expect from a group that didn't get any intervention, right? And just for ethical reasons, I will say that the whole point of the waitlist study is that whichever intervention the group didn't get during the active period of the study, they all received after the study was over. So the children in that case did get their blue light blocking glasses at some point.
Okay, good.
So no change in the control group, and we saw a modest increase in sleep of about 0.5, which doesn't mean a lot to you, but it was about a half a category movement in the sleep education only group. So we got to bear in mind that this was just 2 lessons where we explained a little bit about circadian rhythms, about going out in the morning, about limiting light exposure in the evening, about maybe eating a little bit earlier, about curtailing caffeine use, and we taught them like a breathing technique to help them to regulate themselves in the evening. So we saw.
So they got the information, but not the glasses, not the
they got the information, not the glasses.
And their sleep improved marginally.
So their sleep improved marginally,
but it went in the improvement direction.
Yep. So we've run some t-testing. Now, I'm not a statistical genius by any means, but we've had someone helping us with the data. We run some t-tests, and we did see a statistically significant improvement in their sleep. So that
just from the education.
Just from the education.
Just for them being like, oh, maybe I'll put my phone away a little earlier, or oh, maybe I won't have a 10 p.m. snack, or
maybe I won't drink that Red Bull or Monster Energy, or I don't know what it is now that all the streamers on Twitch try and promote to kids, Prime Water or whatever it is. Maybe I won't have that at 7 or 8 p.m. at night. So obviously these are fundamental like habits that children should be taught in terms of sleep anyway, without the use of blue light blocking glasses. So as you might expect, we saw an improvement there. What I should say as well is that the smallest 2 groups, so those were the smallest 2 groups. The control group was about 20 people. The education only group was about 20 people, and then the numbers jump up a lot for the other groups. So we had the blue light blocking glasses only group. We saw like over double the improvement that we saw in the sleep education group alone. They jumped up from about an average of say 3 to like almost an average of 3.8. So their scores improved a lot just from blue light blocking glasses alone. I mean, we didn't provide any other education whatsoever.
Right. You're just like here. And what were the instructions?
The instructions were wear these glasses for 3 hours before bedtime.
Okay.
In an ideal world, I would have loved to have gone into the depths of, you should wear them approaching sunset if you're inside in front of technology and all this. But to standardize what we delivered to,
you got to keep it simple. And also, these are teenagers. I have a few of those. They don't hold a lot of instructions in their head at one time.
Definitely. And, in terms of our ability to like standardize the information from the point of view of perhaps wanting to like publish this as research in the future, we had to do that. And I was advised to do that. And then in the combined group, we provided the blue light blocking glasses with the education. So we put both of them together, and we saw an improvement beyond what we saw with just the blue light blocking glasses alone. So it wasn't as much of a jump from the education to the blue light blocking glasses when you combined them, but it was a bit higher. So it demonstrated that actually when you provide these interventions together, maybe they have the biggest impact. And the blue light blocking glasses only group, they were the biggest. And in fact, sorry, if you just wait with me 1 second, I'll tell you exactly how many people were in that group. But there was a significant amount more than in these other smaller groups. Here we go. So as you might expect, when it comes to teenagers, kids drop out for all sorts of reasons. They didn't go into school. The staff member was off sick that day, so didn't send the questionnaires out properly. These sorts of things. So I think we went from about 350 recruited, and the waitlist group had 25. The education only group had 20. The blue light blocking glasses and education had 58 final, and the blue light blocking glasses only had 108. So we lost. Our attrition was about a third at the first questionnaire, which is what you expect in field research. And then what happened when we took the third data point is, unfortunately, the schools that had the education and the blue light blocking glasses, they didn't collect the data correctly. So we weren't able to use any of that data, sadly. But in the third follow-up, we saw a sustained, if not continued, improvement in the blue light blocking glasses group. So in fact, just looking at the data here, so the improvements were not only maintained, but they actually, they were made better over the second to fourth week period. And that was 85 people in the blue light blocking glasses only group. So we went from 108 at the first questionnaire after 14 days, completed the follow-up. And then the second one after that, 85 completed it. So we lost only another 20 or so participants, but the scores actually continued to increase. And the education group at the third questionnaire, they sustained their improvements, if not actually improved a little bit across some of the subcategories. And as you might expect, the control group again kind of stayed the same. So what we have is like not the most robust, but interesting data to demonstrate that, the improvements were sustained over a period of time, because that's one of the challenges, is people say, well, it's only a 2-week period. Did the kids carry on wearing the glasses? Was it a placebo effect of, taking part in the study in those 2 weeks? What happens later down the line? Are these effects sustained over, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, 6 weeks? And you have to be practical when you're doing research.
Hi. Sorry, you froze.
Where did I get to?
So placebo, was it a placebo?
Yeah. So like quite often you'll be asked, was it a placebo effect? And so the more data you can gather at follow up, and the better, because the more of a sustained effect that it showed. So our goal was to, collect as much data as we could at all 3 questionnaires. Due to some logistical reasons, we lost quite a bit of data moving into the third questionnaire. But really interestingly, we didn't lose that much of the blue light blocking glasses group. So what that really shows us is that, like, not only was the improvement, significant in 2 weeks, but it was sustained at 4 weeks. So really, where we can go from these results now in this study is that this is the first kind of large scale field study that we've done. It's shown significant results, like statistically significant results, and the trend is that there are improvements from education and from blue light blocking glasses. And so now this warrants, further investigation, in our opinion, of these things. And so we're not sure whether we'll publish this yet, just because we're working on a lot of other kind of projects, but at the moment, like, this is the fuel that we feel that we needed to demonstrate a very powerful effect, and to inform policy, and most importantly to obtain further kind of financial and intellectual support in where we go next.
Amazing. Well, that's a really it's really powerful, right? Because I think there's, as I was alluding to before, there's something about the orange glasses that people just want to think of them as a gimmick. I have a friend who ordered a pair after having a few conversations with me, and her sleep improved immediately. But her children all made fun of her. You're like, oh, Mom, you're like a marketer's dream buying anything, right? So yeah, I think to have this kind of, and I know it's not robust by certain standards, but to have that many people try it and be tracked, and to see a significant improvement it's really incredible. I think it's really going to move the needle, and that you've started something really important here, because it is, at the end of the day, a fairly simple intervention, right? Like, it's a much simpler intervention than trying to get people to stop using technology at night. Like, that is a losing battle, and in many ways impossible.
And I think one of the things here to understand is that, I'm from the generation where I use a lot of technology. I still use a lot of technology. I've learned and become empowered by the information that you guys have taught me on the applied quantum biology certification that I've learned from individuals such as Nathan and Jack Cruz and all of yourselves in the community about the impacts of technology and how it torments the body. And so I've set certain boundaries in place to disconnect from technology at nighttime and such like that. But like most fundamentally, we've got to understand the genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah.
And for me, coming back to the reason why I started this, it's like we've got many problems as a race on planet Earth. Our future is unclear in many areas. And as you and I were talking about before this podcast, in 100 years, everybody listening to this podcast will probably be dead.
Yeah.
But the planet will still be here, and the human race will still, push forward, and we'll have different problems and challenges to solve. And who's going to solve those challenges, and who's going to solve those problems? And it's going to be the youth of today, right? So if we're not equipping the children of today with the best possible opportunities educationally and in terms of their health, what do we expect the future of the planet to look like? My daughter's 3 years old. She doesn't have a choice that her iPad screen, if she looks at it in the evening, is, red with no blue light blocking coming out of it. But the thing to understand is that like I can protect her health because I can make those choices for her, but I couldn't make those choices before I was uninformed. And the same with teenagers. What we've seen from these studies and these trials is that teenagers want to make informed choices. Yes, of course, some of them won't adopt the measures that you put in place. That's going to be the case for anybody, right? But you tend to have the early adopters, and then you tend to have those people that catch on, the people who are, in this case, for the blue light blocking glasses, the marketer's dream. They're the people who are like, the flag bearers, who are, conquering new lands, who are exploring new ways to live. And I personally believe from all my research and evidence and experience, not just in clinic, but also in my own personal life, that a good night's sleep is the best medicine. Being in sync with nature, having cells that function properly, that produce energy, that repair, that restore, that carry out all of these important biological and physiological functions that ensure that we can grow and develop to the fullest of our potential. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to intervene with some of the simplest technology you can find. Blue light blocking glasses. I mean, inexpensive, very easy to wear, easy to get out to people. I would love to see in 5 years' time every single school in the United Kingdom and the US and everywhere else know about these and have stores of them. You have kids that aren't sleeping well or kids that want to learn about them. They go up to the receptionist or, I don't know what you call it, the clerk in the school, and say, oh, can I have a pair of those glasses? And they're just there as a safety precaution to deal with the contraindications of the, maladaptive lighting that we've invented and we flooded all of our schools, all of our hospitals, all of our institutions with. And I know you've been chatting to Dan Ebbett recently, and him and I have been discussing, many ways in which we might use lighting to further, inform trials and such like that in the future to work with kids and families and schools. Because ultimately, we wouldn't need blue light blocking glasses if we hadn't engineered an environment that was so blue light toxic and that was so detrimental to our health. But we've got a long way to go from, where we are now to having human-centric lighting in every school and in every institution. So in the mid section of that needs to come some form of protection and some intervention that can support people. And I think blue light blocking glasses fundamentally is one of the low hanging fruit and the cheapest and most effective interventions that we can use. I always say to people, in an ideal world, I don't wear my blue light blocking glasses. When I go camping out in nature at our family's campsite, I don't need them. If I don't work on the computer in the evening, I don't need them. I have, red lighting candles around the house and such like that. But the fact is, we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. We're in the modern world, and the modern world is full of harmful lighting, and we need to protect ourselves from it.
Yes. And if we just, switch to candles after sunset, then there'd be no need for these things, but that's not happening. And it's definitely not happening with our children. Okay, so just a few logistical things, and then I have one last wrap-up question. So we'll put some links to blue blockers at various price points in the show notes. You mentioned apps that will pull the light out of the iPhones and the iPads. Do you want to just tell the audience which ones you think are good?
Yeah, so I have a document that I created recently, actually, that might be interesting to put in the show notes. I called it "How to Hack Your PC, Your Laptop, and Your Smartphone for Better Sleep," and it details the different programs and apps that are available to filter blue light from screens. So for Android, I'm a big fan of one called Twilight, and there's another one called Blue Light Filter.
Okay.
I don't have an Android device, but my friends who do and clients who do have told me that they're the best and most user-friendly apps that are available. For iPhones and iPads, there is a manual process through which you can go in and activate a shortcut by triple clicking the home button that completely eliminates all of the blue and the green light from the screen. But again, there's a couple of steps to how to do that. And just to make it clear, it's a lot more effective to do this than to use the inbuilt what we would call night shift mode in the Microsoft and Apple devices. I always say to people, oh, well, in truth and in essence, Apple and Microsoft have admitted that they knew that blue light harms us now because they've kind of put these filters into the devices to reduce it a little bit. But the problem is it's a little bit coercive because I liken it to putting a filter on a cigarette. At some point in human history, doctors recommended cigarettes, said there was no problem with cigarettes. There's periods where we said there's no problem with blue light, there's no problem with blue light, and then we say, okay, there is. So here's a filter on that blue light, built into the phone. But it's the same as putting the filter on the cigarette, right? It doesn't take away all of the chemicals or all of the harm. It just filters some of them. So I often say to people, when you download the apps or you change the settings on the iPhone, download the apps on the Android, or use Iris is my favorite program for the computer. That's the equivalent of stopping smoking. Right. That's completely removing the blue light sources. So that's what I recommend.
So you have to hack around the factory settings to really get all if it's something that the phone is doing automatically, it's not taking all the blue light out.
Yeah, it's not taking
you got to get in there and download something or change the settings. Okay.
Yeah.
And then just to wrap up, so you shared all of the research showing the effects, across the population that participated in the study. Anecdotally, what did you notice with the children, or what did they say to you? Or were there any sort of particular stories that stood out?
Yeah, there was one. There was I went into one of the high schools, and it was where we had the combined education and blue light blocking glasses group, and this kid signed up to the study. It was all the children got called into the school hall, and we gave the talk, and they were registering for the study. And he came up. He was the last kid to come up, and his mates were kind of jousting him, oh, do it, you should get involved. And he's there thinking, I don't believe in this, whatever. But my friends are doing it, and so he gets involved. And I come back the next week at the end of the next session. He comes up to me afterwards. He's like, they really work, don't they? They really do work, those things. And I was like, yes, they really do work. And it's funny because he works in one of the supermarkets here, and I see him quite regularly. And every time I see him, he's there yeah, mate, I still wear the glasses.
Oh, fantastic.
And it's lovely because in a small community like this, you can see the impact, and you hear regularly about the impact that it's had. And just having lots of parents reach out to me, obviously, kids broke glasses, kids lost glasses, and they would get back in touch with me please, where can I get another pair of these? I need them in my life now. I've never slept as well, or that sort of thing. And it's really interesting. And I think just anecdotally, by the second education session, I could see a change in the kids. The first time they came in, they're asleep at their desk. They're looking at me like this is some kooky, crazy guy who's trying to tell me about my body clock and light exposure and sorts of things. And you've got to have thick skin when you work with teenagers, right? Because you walk in and you can be. I remember one time I was trying to give a tutorial of a breathing technique during one of the lessons, and the kids are sniggering in the corner, and the kids laughing, and you're just trying to stay straight face with it. But and that was the same for a lot of the education. They're kind of turning their noses up at it, and they're not quite 100% believing you. But by the second time you come in and they've used the glasses, they've made some of the changes, and they just look more engaged, right? Because probably they're sleeping better, but secondly, because they're I did something and it actually worked.
Wait a minute.
So that's one of the reasons I love working with teenagers, because they just get it. And then I think, anecdotally, again, I've had kids come up to me and tell me that they're eating better, that they become more curious about changing their nutrition habits or exercising.
Wow.
And it's the way I see it, very maybe unscientific view is that if you can improve your sleep quality by 20% by, filtering blue light at night, and you got 20% more energy, you have 20% more energy to give to your family, to your friends, to your hobbies, to exercise, to caring about what you eat. Once you start to ask questions about the light in the environment, it piques your interest and curiosity to ask other questions about how other things in the environment impact you. Yeah. And I know that it did for me. That was one of the biggest gifts and blessings of this, is that I started to question everything when I realized that, no one had told me about these things. I became a self-starter and a self-educator. And I realized that the information's out there, but it's just about me going to find it. So hopefully we've inspired a lot of that in the children that took part so far. And hopefully a lot more will come in, future cohorts.
I think so. Yeah. And it's empowering. It's like, wow, I made a different choice and now I feel differently. I wonder what other different choices I can make. Yeah. And starting a ripple effect of hopefully positive change. Daniel, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for doing what you do. If anyone wants to take a look at Daniel's foundation, it's sleepbetterlivebetter.com. Is that correct?
So it's sleepbetterlivebetter.co.uk, but we'll stick a couple of things in the show notes and
we'll put all the links in, but if someone's driving and they just want to hear it, and you're on Instagram as well.
So Daniel White Health on Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. And so those links will all be in the notes, and thank you so much for being here, and thanks for doing what you do.
Cheers. Thank you for having me.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who works from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely check out our Applied Quantum Biology certification to consider as part of your continuing education plan. You can also just jump into our email community. We'd love to hear from you. Again, that's at quantumbiologycollective.org.